Welcome, class. Welcome to another installment of the Senior High Bible class YouTube videos. Now, I'm not going to make any money off of this. I know that I'm trying to get better at doing this, but we're not going to win any film prizes for the efforts here on the YouTube videos. But hopefully they're helping. Hopefully they're giving you some insight into what you need to know for this course. So we're ready to jump into Unit 8.5 over pages 206 to 211, which does bring us to the end of the chapter. So, what is wisdom? What is wisdom? That's something that the author explores here. Wisdom is the ability of thinking and acting with good judgment. Now, as he's writing about it, he talks about the Greek concept of wisdom, which was very up here, otherworldly, didn't have much to do with actual living life down here. It was all very academic, philosophical, and for eggheads, for nerds. But the Hebrew concept was much different. The Hebrew concept was very much of this world, had to do with the decisions that you make day to day. And so the Christians, the early church picked up on that. And so that's how they understood wisdom as well. The Hebrew concept of wisdom was making good decisions in everyday circumstances about your money, your time, who you're going to hang out with, what you're going to do and what you're not going to do. So the Hebrew concept was very different than the Greek concept of wisdom. The Hebrew concept had to do with skill and living, not just with thinking these far out, wide, things would blow your mind, like Simon likes to talk about in his math theory. So, the Hebrew concept is quite a bit different than the Greek concept. How does the textbook define love? Love is the commitment to cherish others regardless of how one feels about them. Regardless of how one feels about them. It has to do with actions and not feelings. Our feelings are all over the place. But it's the actions. And if we choose the right actions, then we'll find that we actually begin to start to have fond thoughts or fond feelings towards other people. Jesus didn't command, your feelings. He said, love your neighbor. Even if your neighbor is a grouchy old man, even if your neighbor is a man who starts his lawnmower at 7:30 in the morning and wakes you up, even if your sister or your younger brother gets into your stuff, we are to love them, not to always feel fond about them, but we are to love them. And that's what the biblical concept of love is getting at. Not so much our feelings. We can train our feelings, we can train our thoughts and our emotions to be under self-controlled, but it's how we react, and we are to react in a way that we would want to be treated. So to learn to love your neighbor as you love yourself. Then what are 4 questions to ask ourselves about our life habits? First one, what are my loves? What do I really love? Because even more so than what we know, it's what we love that will shape our lives. And St. Augustine talked a lot about that. And Tim Keller, I'm sure, if you've read any of his books or listened to any of his sermons, he's talked about the loves that we have in our life shape our character. And our character then leads us in the way that, the way that we live our lives. So what are my loves? What are my loyalties? What am I loyal to? What will I choose to do over this when I'm faced with a consequence? If I'm loyal, if I love my family, I'm loyal to my family, I'm going to choose that over going and playing golf. By the way, I don't like golf at all, so that's not a hard decision. It's much harder when it has to do with soccer or with basketball or with baseball. But then again, what do I love and what am I loyal to? What are my longings? What do I really deep, and these are all tied together. What are my longings? What are my liturgies? And that's not literary context, that's liturgies, Ethan. Liturgies. What are my rhythms of life? Of course, there's another meaning for liturgy, and that's the order of service in a worship service, the order of the way that they do things. High church has a high, really established liturgy for what they do. But in our day-to-day life, what are my rhythms of life? Do I work hard 5, 6 days of the week and then set aside Sunday to be at church, to be with the rest of the body of believers? Do I get up in the morning and spend time with God, reading, praying? Those are all your rhythms and your patterns of life. What are they? They will shape us, and those are good questions for us to ask ourselves. And we need to be intentional. If we're not intentional, we're just going to drift along. We're going to drift along. We'll wake up one day and realize, this is not the way that I wanted my life to turn out. So we must be intentional. We must ask ourselves these questions. We must take stock. We must take inventory. And a couple of things that we can be intentional about. Getting into God's Word. We just talked about that in chapter 7. Praying. Spending time talking to God and also learning to listen to Him, and then be involved in a local church. Those are all things that we can be intentional about. And the church is not always to make us feel good, and we're not always going to be with people who see things the way that we do, but they are still believers, and they are part of the body that we should be involved with. If I cut my hand off, it's not going to survive very long out on its own. And if you decide not to be a part of the body, your hand, you're not going to be healthy as well. You must be plugged into the body, a local body of believers, a local congregation, for you to be the believer that you want to be. All right, be prepared for some study guides and some things to get ready for as we try to wrap up chapter 8. Any questions, any comments, let me know. Until next time.